My name is Nora Ashford, and I was 34 the afternoon my parents walked into my wedding dressed for a burial. My mother wore black with a black veil pinned into her hair. My father wore a black suit, still holding the crease from the box. My sister Dana walked between them with a leather folder against her ribs and a smile she'd clearly been saving all week. The band stopped. 150 guests turned in their chairs. My mother crossed the barn floor in her funeral heels, lifted the microphone off its stand, and said, in the trembling, church-trained voice she saved for exactly these occasions, "We can only grieve for one daughter today." Then she looked at me in my white dress and added the rest without bothering to keep the grief in it. "You'll stay right here until you sign this farmhouse over to your sister." Dana laughed, delighted. My husband set down his glass and rose slowly to his feet. What he put up on the screen behind me, a minute later, was not something any of them saw coming. To understand why my own mother wore mourning to my wedding, you have to go back to a dented tin box that lived under my grandmother's staircase for 40 years. If your family ever mistook your steadiness for something they were owed, stay with me. This one's for you. Let me back up, because a barn full of horrified guests isn't where this actually starts. It starts with the kind of person I am, a person who checks everything twice, then checks it again. I've spent 12 years as an ER nurse in a county hospital, and that work teaches you not to trust what people say, only what you can verify. I noticed the small wrong thing before it becomes the catastrophic one. I was good at that job. I never imagined I'd need the same instincts inside my own family. People who meet me call me calm. What they usually mean is quiet. In my family, quiet had always been mistaken for an open door, one anyone could walk through. I lived alone on Kestrel Lane, in a white farmhouse with a porch I'd repainted myself, one can at a time, the same patient way I'd paid off nursing school and bought the truck in my driveway. Nobody had ever handed me a thing. I want that clear, because later, in front of 150 witnesses, someone was going to insist I owed my entire life to people who had given me nothing. I didn't. It took 34 years and one forged signature for me to finally say so out loud. The farmhouse had belonged to my grandmother before it was mine. Elinor Voss raised me more than my own parents ever did. When the noise at home got to be too much, my father would drop me at the farm for a weekend that stretched into a week. Grandma Elinor never once made me feel like a burden. She taught me to can peaches, change a tire, and more than anything to write things down. "Paper doesn't forget, Nora," she'd say, tapping the ledger where she tracked every dollar. "People forget. Paper never does." Under the stairs, she kept a battered tin box she called her important things tin. It held paper, that was all. By the end of this story, you'll understand that paper was worth more than gold. She died 2 years before my wedding, 82, in her own bed, my hand in hers. In her will she left the farmhouse to me, not the family, me by name, recorded down at the county courthouse. My parents sat through that reading. I watched my mother's face when the attorney read my name and only mine. She smiled the way people smile at a funeral while already doing math about the estate. I filed it away, the way I file a strange symptom that doesn't fit yet. 2 years later, it would fit perfectly, walking into my wedding under a veil. To understand my family, you need the arithmetic, and it never changed. 2 daughters, one reservoir of attention, flowing one direction always. Dana was 3 years younger and 3 years more fragile in my parents' eyes. When she wanted dance lessons, there was money. When I asked, I was told I was the practical one. Practical followed me my whole childhood like a dog nobody fed. It meant, she'll manage, so we won't worry about her. By adulthood, the pattern had a rhythm you could set a clock to. Dana opened a boutique with money my parents scraped together. It failed, she opened another. That failed too. Each time my mother's voice went soft and urgent, and the family rallied around Dana like she was a house on fire. Nobody rallied around me because I never let anything catch fire. I paid my bills, showed up for every shift, was reliable, and reliable in my family was just a gentler word for available. Available to be leaned on, borrowed from, and eventually robbed. I never resented Dana. You can't resent water for running downhill. I resented that nobody ever asked if I was tired of being the hill. I met Marcus Hale at a fire department fundraiser. He taught history 2 towns over and had the steadiest hands I'd ever seen on a man who wasn't a surgeon. We dated 2 years before he proposed. Said on the porch of the farmhouse, paint still drying behind us. I said yes before he finished the sentence. I called my parents the next morning. My mother went quiet, not happy quiet, calculating quiet. Then, "That's nice, honey, and what happens with the house?" Not congratulations, the house. I told her it was mine and would stay mine, and Marcus understood that completely. "We'll see," she said, meaning the opposite. I heard the phone muffle against her chest, heard her call my father, heard Dana's name, heard a door close. When she came back, the line was bright and false. "We'll celebrate soon," she said and hung up. I sat with the ring still unfamiliar on my hand and a cold feeling that had nothing to do with Marcus. I knew that closed-door tone. I'd heard it my whole childhood, always right before something got decided about me without me. I told myself I was reading too much into a phone call. I was half right. My family didn't get strange around my wedding. They got organized. The first real ask came over coffee at my mother's table, the good coffee she saved for company, which should have been my first warning. She said the family had been talking code in my family for a decision already made. Dana was struggling, she said. Wouldn't it mean so much if I shared the farm, put Dana's name on the deed for the family? I set my cup down and said no, kindly but clearly. 12 years of night shifts teaches you a clean no now saves a worse conversation later. My mother's face changed like weather. "After everything this family has done for you," she said, dabbing at nothing. I asked what exactly the family had done that I hadn't done myself. She didn't answer. Instead, "You owe this family more than you think, Nora. Not more than you know, more than you think." As if there were a bill I hadn't been shown yet. Dana called days later, opening with sugar the way she always did, thrilled about the wedding. Marcus seemed lovely, then circling sideways to the real point. Wasn't the farm really the family's place since Grandma had lived there? Wouldn't it be lovely if it stayed properly in the family? I told her it was in the family. It was mine and I was family. She laughed her light little laugh, the one for when she'd decided you were being difficult. "Don't worry about it, Nor. It's all going to get sorted out soon." Sorted out? She'd already moved on, chattering about my niece Lily 6, the one unambiguously good thing my sister ever produced. Lily got on the phone to tell me about the picture she'd drawn, the farmhouse, crooked windows, a huge yellow sun so you can always find your way home, Aunt Nora. I nearly cried at my own sink. Then Dana took the phone back, sugar gone. "Talk soon." My sister always smiled widest right before she took something. I'd watched her do it at Christmas, at the funeral, at the will reading, crying beautifully and asking the attorney twice about the property. That feeling sent me down a hallway I usually kept shut. I was 9, the night before one of Dana's recitals, the house all activity for her and none for me, so ordinary I'd stopped noticing. I came down for water and froze in the dark because my mother was on the phone with my aunt, using the low, honest voice she only used when she thought no one could hear. She said I was a strange child, too serious, too much like Grandma Aliner. Then, sometimes I look at her, and I swear she was never really one of us. I stood in that hallway and felt the sentence land and stay. I was 9. I went back upstairs without my water and understood, in the wordless way children understand things, that I'd been weighed and found separate. I never told anyone. I built my whole life around being useful enough that maybe someday she'd take it back. She never did. Standing in my kitchen at 34 with Dana's voice still in my ear, I finally let myself know she never would. I didn't cry that night. I'd already done my crying at 9. What I felt instead was clarity, cold and clean, the feeling right before you do the next correct thing in a code. I started paying attention, which for me means watching, and writing everything down. The wedding gave me plenty of material. Marcus and I were paying for most of it ourselves, at the Redgate barn, string lights, a pull-down screen the owners normally used for slideshows. My parents had opinions anyway, a waste of money while Dana was drowning, my father said through my mother, a lot of unnecessary fuss. Dana offered to help plan, then used every call to circle back to the farm. Wouldn't it be smart to get the family's assets sorted before I married a stranger? Marcus was not a stranger. He was the first person in my adult life who looked at what I carried and offered to carry half. He never once mentioned the house, except to say it was mine and he was glad I had it. In my family, love came with an invoice. His never did. One evening, he found me at the table with Grandma's ledger open, and he didn't ask what was wrong, just made tea and sat with me. "Your family is circling something," he said. "You should trust the part of you that already knows." I did know, I just didn't have the shape of it yet. 2 days later, the shape arrived. A stiff envelope, certified mail, a return address I didn't recognize. I opened it at the kitchen table. letterhead from a title insurance company, in the careful, bloodless language companies use when something's gone wrong and they don't want to be the ones to say so. As part of a routine records review, they'd identified a recently recorded document affecting my property. Were the parties authorized? A reference number. No explanation of what the document actually was. I read it 3 times, the way I read a chart that doesn't add up. I had not signed anything. My grandmother's voice came across the years, tapping her ledger. Paper doesn't forget. Someone had put paper into the world with my house's name on it, and I hadn't held the pen. My first instinct wasn't panic. Panic's a luxury you skip in an ER. I wrote the date, the reference number, 1 sentence. I did not authorize any document on this property. Then I called. It was after 5. Closed. The title company could tell me almost nothing more the next morning. A document existed in the chain of title, and the fastest way to see it was the county recorder's office, 40 minutes east. Public record, anyone could request a copy. That word, public, did something to me. Whatever had been done to my house had been filed in a government building, sitting as fact until someone challenged it. Certified copies took several business days. Several business days, in an ER, is the difference between catching a problem and being caught by one. I could view the record on their public terminal, but I had 3 night shifts back to back. The soonest I could physically stand in that office was 5 days out. I asked them to start preparing copies anyway, and hung up understanding whoever had done this had counted on exactly that delay. That Sunday my mother summoned me to dinner in town. I went because I wanted to watch their faces more than I wanted to stay home safe. My father barely spoke to me all evening. My mother orbited the kitchen, bright and busy. Dana was there with Lily, who told me about a caterpillar named Gerald, which nearly made even my father smile. Then the plates cleared and the real reason walked out. Wasn't it time we all sat with a lawyer and got the farm handled properly? I said it was handled. Grandma's will had settled that 2 years ago. My mother's smile tightened. Dana too casually, so you haven't signed anything yet? The table went still for one breath. My mother shot her a look. Dana laughed it off. So much paperwork with a wedding coming up. But I'd heard it, signed anything yet, as if signing were expected, as if a document already existed, waiting on my name. 5 days later, on a gray Tuesday after a brutal shift, I drove east instead of going home to sleep. The clerk slid a folder across the counter. On top, my grandmother's deed, clean and correct, the farmhouse recorded to me alone. Underneath, a second document. A quitclaim deed recently recorded transferring an interest in my property. And on it, a signature, mine, looping the way mine leans, close enough to fool a stranger, wrong enough to stop my breath. I had never seen it. Never signed it. Below my forged name, added as a new owner of my grandmother's farm, was a name I knew as well as my own. Dana Ashford. My sister had put her name on my house, and forged mine, to make it possible. I stood at that counter and made no sound. I asked for certified copies of both documents, the exact recording date, the notary's name. I drove home, slept 4 hours, and called a lawyer. Denise Marlowe had handled real estate in that county for 20 years. I read her everything, slow and exact. Nora, she said, a forged signature on a deed isn't a family disagreement, it's a felony. The quitclaim was almost certainly void. You can't transfer property with a signature someone never wrote, but void wasn't automatic. Once recorded, a forgery sits on the public record looking real until a court strikes it. We'd need to file, prove the forgery, let the records tell the story. Do not confront them, she said. Desperate people do bigger, dumber things. She had no idea how right she'd be. While she talked, my mother's name lit up my phone 3 times in a row. I let it ring. For the first time in my life, I let her call go, and I understood I was the one holding the pen now. Denise had told me to gather everything, and there was one thing I hadn't touched since the funeral, my grandmother's tin box, still under the stairs. That night I finally pulled it out, heavier than I remembered, chipped down to gray metal at the corners. She told me once, near the end, everything you'll ever need is in that tin, Nora. Everything. NG they'll ever try to take, that's where the truth lives. I thought she meant keepsakes. I lifted the lid. Cedar and old paper rose up like she'd closed it yesterday. On top, folded once, a letter in her round, deliberate hand. Underneath, in a labeled sleeve, a second copy of the deed, the real recording, the one that said this house was mine before anyone dared forge me out of it. I unfolded the letter and heard her voice in every line. She'd written it the last spring she was alive, though she'd never given it to me. She knew exactly what my parents were. She'd watched them dote on Dana and lean on me my whole life, and it had broken something in her she never let me see. "I didn't leave you this farm because you needed a house," she wrote. "I left it to you because you needed proof. Proof that somebody chose you first, on purpose, in writing, where no one could argue it away later." Near the bottom, underlined once, "This house already knows who it belongs to. Don't let anyone move you from it." Something loose in me my whole life clicked into place and held. She'd known. 2 years before any title company mailed me a warning, my grandmother had understood someone would come for this farm, and she'd left me not just the deed, but the exact words to stand on while I fought for it. I built a folder the old-fashioned way, paper in sleeves, the way Eleanor Voss would have done it. The real deed, her letter, the title company's warning, my own notes, her stationery on top, so every time I opened it, the first thing I'd see was her handwriting telling me the house already knew where it belonged. I slept that night for the first time in weeks. I showed Marcus everything the next morning. He read it all in silence, and when he reached the line about the house knowing who it belonged to, he went quiet for a while. Then he did the thing I love him for. He didn't get angry on my behalf, he got practical. "Okay, we know what they did, the question is what they do next." Denise was already moving to void the deed and refer the forgery to the county, but Marcus pointed at the real pattern. "They don't do quiet, they do audiences. Every time they've wanted something, they've done it in front of people, so the pressure lands on you to keep the peace." He was right. They'd never wanted to steal the farm in the dark. They wanted me to hand it over in the light, smiling, so afterward it would look like a gift. And the biggest audience I had coming was my wedding. "If they're going to make a scene," he said, "they'll make it wherever it costs you the most to refuse." The Redgate barn, 150 guests, a screen already wired for a slideshow. I looked at the folder on the table and made a decision that felt less like revenge and more like triage. Then if they bring the scene to me, I'll be ready to show everyone what's inside it. Denise and I spent 2 weeks building the trail, and every piece made the picture uglier. The forged deed had been recorded 3 weeks before the certified letter reached my mailbox. Whoever filed it had moved first, betting I wouldn't look until it was too late. The recorder's office logs who submits documents, and which notary acknowledged them. The notary, a woman named Whitfield near the courthouse, remembered a woman who'd come in with a deed already drawn up, presenting ID, signing on behalf of a sister who couldn't be there. Following a busy day, she'd acknowledged the signature without much scrutiny. The description was thin but fit: brown hair to the shoulders, confident, a little impatient, a young daughter waiting in a chair, coloring. My stomach turned at that, Lily sitting in a notary's office while her mother forged my name 3 feet away, not knowing a thing, coloring a son so big I could find my way home. The log, the recording date, the 2 deeds side by side, my grandmother's original safe in the tin, all of it braided into one clean rope. This was no longer suspicion. This was a case. The only real question left was whether my mother had merely blessed it or helped build it. I already suspected the answer. 2 days later, without meaning to look for anything, I found the proof. Dana dropped Lily at the farm because a sitter fell through, and I was, as always, the reliable one you could leave a child with. Lily brought Dana's old tablet and asked me to start her show. It woke to a messaging thread my sister had left open, because Dana has never once thought about who might see her mess. I did not scroll, but the message already open put itself in front of my eyes before I could look away. To my mother, the wedding's our last shot. Once she signs in front of everyone, she can't back out. Mom, you have to make it happen before the bank moves. I got Lily's cartoon going, set the tablet in her hands, and stepped into the next room with my heart hammering. I called Denise and told her exactly what had appeared, unbidden, and asked what I was allowed to do with it. "Leave it alone," she said. "Our case lived on the county records, not messages I had no right to read. We don't need it, the forgery proves itself." She was right, but 2 words wouldn't leave me before the bank. There was a bank in this, a clock I hadn't seen yet ticking against somebody, maybe not me. That night, laying it all out with Denise, the fear finally left me and something steadier moved in. Dana had forged my name. My mother knew and wasn't just blessing it, she was being begged to act. There was a bank, a deadline none of us could fully see, and my family had no idea I knew any of it. They thought I was still their reliable Nora, 5 days behind everything. They thought they were hunting me. I already held the whole map. Denise advised patience, the hardest advice I've ever taken. Confront them now and they'd scatter, lawyer up, turn a clean case into a war. Stay quiet, and they'd walk straight into whatever room they'd chosen and expose themselves in front of the exact witnesses I'd need. Let them think it's working, she said, right up until it doesn't. So I smiled through my mother's calls. I answered Dana's jabs with mild nothing. I let them believe I was soft, busy, easy to outrun. It was the strangest, quietest power I've ever held. I knew how the story ended. They didn't. I was fairly sure I already knew where they'd choose to jump, somewhere with string lights and a pull-down screen. 3 deadlines were closing on the same point. My wedding, 16 days out, fixed in public. Denise's filing, timed for before month's end because the longer a forgery sits unchallenged, the more damage it does. And the bank from Dana's message, its own countdown running somewhere in town. My mother's calls got more frequent and syrupy. She wanted peace before the big day, a united family. Then, 4 days out, a voicemail I still have. Calm in a way that was worse than shouting. "We'll all be there on your day, honey, the whole family. Wear something nice. We're going to settle this once and for all." Settle it on my wedding day in front of everyone. Instead of fear, an almost surgical calm settled over me. They'd chosen the room. They'd RSVP'd to their own undoing and called it a family reunion. I called Marcus and played it for him. "Okay," he said. "Let's make sure the screen's ready." I spent the last 4 days the way my grandmother would have, the folder in order, the file loaded, everything checked 3 times. 3 nights before the wedding, I nearly talked myself out of it. Not the wedding, the truth. Maybe I should call my mother privately, show her the folder alone, give her a chance to call it off before it ever reached the barn. Spare Lily the scene, spare all of us. Marcus found me at the table with that soft, familiar pull, the one that had run my whole life. If you absorb it quietly enough, you get to keep the peace. He sat down, took my hand. "The private road, the quiet one where you fix it yourselves and nobody's embarrassed, you've offered them that road your whole life. They've burned it every time. They chose the audience. Let them stand in it." He was right. I'd offered that road at every coffee table, every dinner, every phone call, and every time they'd pressed harder in front of more people. They didn't want a quiet resolution. They wanted a public surrender. So if they wanted 150 witnesses, 150 witnesses would see all of it. 2 days before the wedding, Denise called with the piece that explained everything, pulled straight from the public record. The same open books my family had assumed no one would read. Years earlier, my parents had opened a home equity line against their own house, and over 3 years, drained it nearly dry. $170,000, withdrawal after withdrawal, lining up almost to the week with each of Dana's failed boutiques and bailouts. They'd mortgaged the roof over their own heads to keep her afloat, and now the line was maxed, the payments behind, the record carrying the word default. That was the bank. That was the clock. My parents were about to lose the house I grew up in, because they'd spent it on the daughter they favored, and the only clean, unencumbered asset left standing in the whole family was a farmhouse on Kestrel Lane an old woman had deliberately left to the other daughter. They didn't want my house because they were cruel. Or not only. They wanted it because it was the last dry ground in a flood they'd made themselves. I felt something close to pity for about a minute. Then I remembered a forged signature and a 9-year-old in a dark hallway and a mother rehearsing a funeral for a living daughter, and the pity folded itself small and got out of the way. Once I understood the money, the rest unfolded like a diagram. The forged deed was shaky ground. A signature can be challenged, and if I looked closely, Dana could face real trouble. What they needed was for me to sign a genuine transfer, freely given, one no court could ever unwind. And the fastest way to get a reluctant, reliable, peacekeeping woman to sign away her home is to corner her in public, wrap it in grief and shame, and make refusing feel like cruelty performed in front of everyone she loves. That was the funeral costume. My mother wasn't mourning a death. She was staging one, casting me as the daughter who'd killed the family by refusing to help, so a barn full of my friends would turn and silently beg me to just sign and make the sad woman stop. 2 years earlier it might have worked. They had no way of knowing Nora had spent the last month reading her grandmother's ledger and letter, finally learning that being chosen once, on purpose, in writing, was worth more than a lifetime of their approval. I knew exactly what they were going to do. I knew the costume, the microphone, the tears, the timing, and because I knew, I could do the one thing they'd never planned for. Let them finish the whole performance, then turn on the lights. The day before, Marcus and I went to the barn to help set up, and while the florist fussed and the caterer counted chairs, we did one more quiet piece of work. A laptop wired to the projector, a remote to advance slides. Our real slideshow was loaded, Marcus and me at the lake, the porch, Lily's crayon drawing scanned in, sun and all. In a second folder, we loaded another file, named something plain and forgettable. Not out of cruelty, insurance. I built it the way you stock a crash cart, praying you never need it, ready if you do. Slide 1, the real deed, the farm to me alone. Slide 2, the forged quitclaim, my faked signature beside Dana's real one, the notary's log, the fraud reference number. Slide 3, the home equity line, the withdrawals, the default notices, the plain arithmetic of where the money went. I reviewed each one 3 times, the nurse in me refusing to let a single detail be wrong. We set one rule and said it aloud so neither of us could pretend otherwise. The file stayed dark unless they forced it into the light. If they behaved like decent people, it would never run. If they tried to take my home through public shame, Marcus would advance one slide, and the room would finally see what I'd carried alone. My father called late that night, the strangest call of my life. He almost never phoned me directly. "You don't have to come tomorrow," he said, "if you don't want to." It took a second to understand. He meant I didn't have to attend my own wedding, his clumsy way of warning me off. The closest thing to protection he'd ever offered, and for one aching moment I saw the man underneath, the one who used to drive me to the farm when the house got loud. I almost reached for him. Then I asked gently if he knew what Mom was planning. The line went quiet, and the moment passed the way it always passed with him. "Just listen to your mother, Nora. She knows what's best for this family." He knew, all of it, and his idea of protecting me was to suggest I stay home so I wouldn't be there to refuse. "I'll be there, Dad," I said. "I wouldn't miss it." I hung up before he could hear I meant it as a promise, not a comfort. Getting ready the morning of, I realized my family had made one enormous miscalculation. They'd chosen my wedding as their stage because they thought the audience would pressure me. They never considered who that audience actually was. Half my ER crew was out there, nurses who'd watch me stay steady through things that break most people. Neighbors who'd watch me paint that porch myself. My maid of honor's husband, a sheriff's deputy in that county, who knew exactly what a forged deed meant. And in a twist my mother would regret completely, their own pastor, who'd baptized Dana and buried my grandmother, and sincerely believed this was a day of joy. My mother had built her scene for a jury of sympathetic strangers. Instead, she was about to perform it for a room full of people who knew me, respected me, and in one case carried a badge. I stood in the side room in my grandmother's borrowed pearls, her folder tucked in Marcus's jacket like a second heartbeat. The coordinator knocked to say 2 late arrivals had shown up despite RSVPing no. "Seat them wherever they like," I said. "They won't be staying." She didn't understand yet. Soon everyone would. I read my grandmother's line one last time. "This house already knows who it belongs to. Don't let anyone move you from it." I made myself a set of promises. I would not grab the microphone and shout. I would not match her volume. I would let her finish, let the whole barn see exactly what she'd come to do, in her own words, in her own black. Only then would I nod to Marcus, and the truth I'd carried alone would stop being mine to carry alone. The ceremony itself was beautiful, and I refused to let them have that part. Marcus waited under an arch of wildflowers, his eyes going bright the moment he saw me. The pastor spoke about steadiness, about 2 people choosing each other on purpose. I thought of Grandma's word, chosen, and had to breathe carefully. We meant every vow. For 11 minutes I forgot there was a folder at all. Then it was done, the room cheered, and we walked into the reception, string lights glowing, the screen ready at the front. That's when I felt the temperature shift. I've worked enough trauma bays to feel a crowd turn before I can name why. A ripple near the 3rd row, chairs scraping, a murmur spreading outward like the first ring from a stone dropped in water. My mother in unrelieved black, veil down. My father behind her, stiff and silent. Dana between them, chin up, folder under her arm, pen already in hand like a woman arriving to close a deal. Marcus's fingers found mine and squeezed once. My mother reached the front, took the microphone, and the cold open of this whole story finally caught up to the room. For a moment nobody stopped her, because nobody could believe it. She lifted her veil just enough to be seen and put on her grieving face, trembling chin, glistening eyes, the whole practiced apparatus of a sorrow she'd simply decided to feel. She let the silence stretch, because she'd always understood silence is where an audience leans in. She told my guests this was the hardest day of her life. She'd raised 2 daughters to love each other, and one had turned her back the moment the family needed her most. She never said my name, she didn't have to, then she delivered the line she'd worn black to say, "We can only grieve for one daughter today." The barn went silent. She drove it home. "You'll stay right here until you sign this house over to your sister." On cue, Dana stepped forward, pen extended across 10 feet of floor, laughing, because she genuinely believed I was about to walk over and sign. I didn't move toward the pen. I felt Marcus rise beside me, unhurried, the calmest man in a barn full of frightened people. He didn't raise his voice. He asked quietly, "Nora, is it all right if I show them?" I gave the answer I'd been rehearsing for a month, soft, almost kind. "Yes, I think everyone should see the rest of it." Then, to my mother directly, steady and low, carrying anyway because a quiet room amplifies calm better than any microphone, "You can put that down now, Mom. You came here to bury me in front of my friends. The least I can do is let them stay for the whole funeral." Her grieving face flickered, and underneath it, for the first time, I saw fear. She hadn't planned for this. She recovered fast, sharpening her voice, "Nora, don't you dare make a scene at your own wedding," but I wasn't listening anymore. Marcus touched the laptop, and the screen woke bright and white, and 150 faces turned toward it. Slide 1, my grandmother's real deed, enlarged, the county stamp unmistakable. The farmhouse belonged to Nora Ashford, transferred by the last will of Eleanor Voss 2 years earlier. A murmur turned through the guests. "That's Grandma's deed, Carol," said a neighbor, stunned. "That's Eleanor's writing right there." Dana went still, staring at the screen, doing frantic math about slide 2. Marcus glanced at me. I nodded. He advanced it. The barn made a sound I'd never heard a crowd make, a sharp, unanimous breath. The forged quitclaim, enlarged huge, my name in a looping counterfeit hand beside Dana's real one, the notary's log, the fraud reference number, and beneath it, in plain type, "This signature is a forgery. I never signed this document." "Dana," my mother hissed, "off mic now." It carried anyway. That's a mistake," Dana stammered, and it was the worst thing she could have said, because it wasn't a denial, it was a fumble, and everyone heard it as exactly that. The deputy at table 4 rose to his full height, unhurried, and looked at Dana with the flat attention of a man who's just recognized a crime. The pen slipped from her fingers and clattered on the floor. My mother reached for the microphone one final time. "This is a private family matter. Turn it off. Turn it off right now." I looked at Marcus, looked at the room. "Show them the rest." Slide 3, the home equity line, laid bare. $170,000, withdrawal by withdrawal, default notices, the plain, terrible arithmetic of a couple who'd spent their own house down to nothing on one daughter and come to a wedding to take the other's house to cover it. And at the bottom, a small box with the message that had surfaced on a child's tablet, the one we hadn't even needed for the case. But that had to see the light for the room, so no one could ever call it a misunderstanding. My mother's own words, "She was never really one of us. Once she signs, we let the bank take Eleanor's house and split the money." The barn went silent with weight. The pastor turned his face away. A small hand slipped into mine, Lily, frightened by a storm she. I didn't understand. I knelt in my wedding dress and put my hand gently over her eyes. "Not for you, sweetheart. This part isn't for you." My maid of honor carried her out into the sunshine. When I stood, the whole barn was looking at me, and for the first time in my 34 years, I was not afraid of my mother's face. I took Grandma's letter from Marcus's jacket and read one line aloud, slow and clear. "This house already knows who it belongs to." Then, to my mother, "You didn't come here to mourn me. You came to rob me in front of everyone I love because you thought a crowd would make me too ashamed to say no. But I'm not the one who should be ashamed today. You forged my name on my grandmother's house. You drained your own home dry for the daughter you always chose. And you put on black and called it grief so 150 people would help you take the last thing I have left of the person who ever chose me first. It's all on the county record now. And now it's in front of every witness you invited yourselves." Her face finally broke, not sorrow underneath, fury, the rage of someone who's always won by making a scene and just discovered the scene belonged to someone else. She screamed I was ungrateful, that I'd humiliated the family, swinging blame around the room, and the guests watched her with the cold pity you feel for someone who's finally shown you exactly who they are. The deputy started walking toward the front. My father took my mother's elbow and steered her toward the door, gray-faced, muttering about lawyers. Dana snatched at the forged pages as if gathering them could unhappen what everyone had seen, then gave up and simply ran, heels loud on the wood, out through the string lights and into the gravel lot. My mother went after her. My father went after both. Three figures in funeral black fleeing a wedding they'd come to turn into a grave. Doors banged. Tires spat gravel. Then they were gone, leaving a pen on the floor and unsigned pages fluttering behind them, every single one, because the one thing they'd come for was the one thing they never got. The barn sat in ringing quiet. Then Marcus did the kindest thing of the night. He touched the laptop, and the forged deed and the money and my mother's words vanished, replaced by the real slideshow. Marcus and me at the lake, the porch, Lily's crayon sun. The pastor rose and instead of his prepared sermon simply said, "Well, I think we all know now exactly who this young woman is and who raised her." Then, smiling at us, "Shall we get on with celebrating a marriage?" The barn exhaled and unbelievably began to laugh, then clap. The music started again. Lily ran to me and I swung her onto my hip while she pointed at her own drawing on the screen. "That's my son, Aunt Nora, that's my son." I stood there holding my niece and my husband's hand, and for the first time in my life, I was in a room full of family where not one person wanted a single thing from me except to see me happy. The rest arrived quietly, on paper, which is the only kind of justice that lasts. Denise filed the following week, and the forged deed was struck from the record, void, as if it had never dared to exist. The county forwarded the forgery to the district attorney, and Dana spent the following months learning what a signature costs when it was never hers to write. My parents' house went the way it had always been headed once the equity line ran dry, foreclosure, taken by the bank that spent the whole story racing. I take no credit for that, and no pleasure in it. They dug that hole themselves. My mother never apologized. There was one voicemail weeks later, still casting herself as the victim, still talking about everything I supposedly owed. I didn't call back. I saved it anyway, the way my grandmother taught me. Paper doesn't forget. Neither, it turns out, do I. The farmhouse stayed mine, clean, titled, unarguable. Marcus moved his books into the room with the best morning light, and we repainted the porch that spring, 2 cans at a time. Some nights I still take the tin box down from under the stairs, not because I need anything inside it but to sit with her letter a few quiet minutes. This house already knows who it belongs to. It always did. It just took the rest of us a while to catch up. There was one person in that family I refused to lose, Lily. None of it had ever been hers. She was 6, coloring a son in a notary's office while the adults around her committed a crime she'll only understand once she's grown. So I did the one thing my mother never managed for me. I made sure a child knew, plainly and often, that she was wanted for nothing but herself. Lily started spending Saturdays at the farm. We feed the chickens, bake bad cookies, watch the light go gold over fields her great-great-grandmother once worked. She asked me once, in the blunt way children have, if she'd done something wrong. I knelt and told her the truth a child can hold. You never owe anybody your love as payment. Not them, not even me. You get to give it because you want to. That's the only way it counts. She thought about that with her whole serious little face, then nodded, and asked if we could go find the caterpillar named Gerald. So we did. If there's one thing I want you to carry out of this barn with me, it's this. Being the strong one in your family was never a debt you owed them your roof to repay. It was the steadiness you were quietly building all along, so that on the day they finally came for everything, you'd have the calm to keep it. That's my story. A funeral dress, a forged signature, and a screen that finally showed a whole room the truth they'd worn black to hide.